Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our latest public talks. This is our second virtual event in our partnership with Voices of Wall Street. I'm Katie Perry, the VP of Marketing at Public, and I'm joined by Hope King, business reporter at Axios and a host of Voices of Wall Street. Thank you all for being here. Today, we're digging into esports and gaming. As live sporting events screeched to a halt due to COVID-19, television networks scrambled to fill their programming gaps. Esports is at its core competitive video gaming. And while competitive video gaming has been around for quite some time, the rise of live streaming platforms has helped esports grow into a billion-dollar industry.
That's right. So what does that mean for you? Well, as potential investors, people curious about the industry, we're going to have something for you tonight that we hope will answer your questions with the help of three amazing guests. We have Ann Hand. She's the chairman and CEO of Super League Gaming. We have Jeff Cohen, the VP of Strategy and Investor Relations at Esports Entertainment Group, and Nicholas Gruss, who is an analyst at ARK Invest. So we'll chat with each one-on-one for about 8 minutes. We'll talk about where the industry is headed, where it's going. We'll look at a couple of companies and stocks too, and we'll have a bit of a roundtable and a short Q&A around 5:25 p.m. Eastern time if you're looking at your clocks. We'll wrap up around 5:45.
But before we dive in, for those of you new to the community, what is public.com? We're an investing social network where you can buy any stock with any amount of money and share ideas within a community of investors. We make it possible to build your confidence in investing in the very same place you invest. There's going to be a link shared in the chat to download the app, so watch out for that. You will receive $50 in free stock when you open your account for US residents 18 and up. New accounts only, and for the fine print, you can see public.com/disclosures. Voices of Wall Street, we're so glad to partner with them again. They are a video-first financial media company focused on stock news, industry trends, and insights from the sharpest minds on Wall Street and in business. And quick PSA before we start, none of this is investment advice. So with that, I'll let Hope take it away.
Thanks so much, Katie. And again, everybody, thank you for spending some of your Tuesday with us. Let's get started with our first guest. She is Ann Hand, the chairman and CEO of Super League Gaming. This is one company at the center of competitive video gaming. So we are super honored to have her here today. So gaming, of course, Ann has had a moment, many moments, I would say, as video games have become now a real source of go-to entertainment and for people to connect. We know gaming is very social. So let's just start with giving those who are not as familiar with Super League Gaming what the company is and what you're seeing in terms of the trends.
Yeah, so the company was founded about 6 years ago, and the premise was that with all the excitement happening at the professional esports level, that there would inevitably be more thirst, more interest to, for everyday to have an opportunity to compete in new and different ways beyond the already very competitive gameplay that exists. We kind of used esports as a little bit of the Trojan horse there. It was a hot kind of topic, this notion of the void in competitive gaming for everyday gamers. But we're not focused on the 10,000 professionals. We're focused on the fact that there's 3 billion gamers out there on the planet and 50% identify as highly competitive. And so it's really speaking to that highly competitive gamer and the different ways that we could aggregate community, to aggregate a nice diverse audience of gamers across different ages and skill levels and genres of games, and aggregate their content, right? Tournaments is just one way we extract content. What I would say are the trends the entry point looked like the big trend was more and more competitive video gaming and this notion of esports, but there's just bigger trends afoot. So first, gaming's already way bigger than any other form of entertainment, bigger than TV, 3 times the size of the global film box office. That was all pre-COVID. Of course, COVID's only further powered that. The other thing is, and this one always surprises investors the most, frankly, it surprised me a bit when I was getting into this space because gaming's changed a lot since the days of me playing Galaga and Centipede, right? And so one of the things that surprised me is that when you look at how much time players are spending socializing and watching other people's gameplay, it's more hours than they're actually playing the game themselves. So that's a bit of a wake-up call that, again, this interactive form of socializing and entertaining, it's not even just about the play itself. I think another important macro trend is obviously the rise of 5G broadband, more cloud-based gaming, which means if I want to be a competitive gamer, I don't have to invest in expensive broadband and the heavy hardware that exists for it. So that makes gaming even more accessible. And then the thing that I would also say that I think is probably the greatest force of what's happening when you look at what the Super League platform does is we're pushing tools into the hands of everyday gamers to create their own competitive gameplay and viewing content. And when we do that, what we're really doing is feeding into this trend that these days everybody can be a content creator. The democratization of the content creator class, it's not 5 big studios pushing down content, it's millions of everyday content creators being able to push their content up in this new world that we're in, where we have media completely disaggregated.
I'm so glad we started with you and you gave us the backdrop, especially if you can repeat that figure again. So how many competitive gamers are there in the world?
Yeah, 3 billion gamers in total, and about 48% identify as highly competitive. We looked at 3 factors in determining that. First, they're playing a minimum of 8 hours of gameplay a week. Now, if you have a kid playing Fortnite, you could only hope it was only 8 hours. They're watching an additional 9 hours of someone else's gameplay content. And that's not just the professional stuff. That's about the fact that watching gameplay is actually entertaining. It's about the shoutcaster, the influencer. And then the third metric is they've probably invested in some kind of peripheral, maybe a Turtle Beach headset or a Logitech gaming mouse, something that allows them to level up and play a little more competitively. Now, that last point said, what I would clarify is that now that mobile gaming is becoming more and more competitive, and there are legitimate competitive esports teams out there, professional teams that are playing around mobile titles, it just further, again, makes esports and competitive gaming accessible to anyone who's holding a smartphone.
And I think the context that you gave, and thank you for repeating it, is important because I think most people, still look at movies and television as where some of those big ad dollars are going. There's an estimated 3 billion, though. Let's just talk about just professional esports. Just first, before we get to all of the other things, which you mentioned, of course, when you are looking at just collective viewing of other people watching games, that's something different. But if we just look at the professional esports revenue, there is an estimated revenue for 2022 of about 3 billion, and that's up from 655 million in 2017. How do you look at that pie? And then also, if you talk about this viewership pattern that you're watching, how do you really allocate your strategy to tackling both sides of the equation?
Yeah, so that's one of my favorite questions, because first, look at the audience for the pro level. Well, it's north of 400 million viewers globally. It's already bigger than the National Hockey League, than the MLB, right? So that again is a first wake-up call for investors who realize that this fan base is massive. But again, they're only watching this several thousand professional players, but yet there's so much other gaming content that is being consumed. Now, that said, the monetization model for the pro teams does, at least today, still somewhat mirror a traditional sports team. It's ticketing, it's merchandise, it's broadcast rights, it's sponsorship. And if we share a lot of common investors with some of the pro teams, like the owners of Team Liquid, the Immortals, Team Envy, Cloud9, they're investors in our company as well. So they're kind of like family. We know a lot about those business models. And what they are trying to do is find another leg of revenue, something that goes beyond. So like when you hear like a FaZe Clan or 100 Thieves out there, they're really much more like content and lifestyle entertainment companies on top of that traditional sports model. The reason I love the question about the 3 billion in 2022, I've been kind of vocal on this. That stat is fine, but that stat only represents what's been known in the professional esports system. So it is simply extrapolating out, the ticketing and the merch and all those revenue streams I talked about for those big mega events where people are piling into Madison Square Garden or Staples. If you think about a classic pyramid structure, you've got 10,000 pros at the top. We're talking about the 3 billion. So I ran a $3 billion P&L at BP, a global P&L. We had 3,000 employees. I thought it was pretty large, but in the scheme of things, that's nothing. And all the smart people that are around esports and on this call would not be investing in this space if we thought the whole pie to divide amongst us was 3 billion. It is way bigger than that. And we just don't even know how to define the edges of the pie.
Before we get into our next two guests, and we're going to bring Ann back later for a roundtable, I want you, if you can, share a little bit more about your M&A strategy, especially your most recent purchase.
Yeah, so we announced our intention to acquire a company called Mob Crush. We've known the company for about 5 years. It just fits beautifully with our model. And some of that is that over time, when you're in a nascent space, you start to hone your strategy, right? And we slowly figured out we had marched pretty much in alignment with each other. First, we're all about that middle tier of that pyramid. So whether it's the person who wants to broadcast their gameplay using Mob Crush tools, or it's the person who wants to create gameplay experiences for themselves and their friends using Super League tools, it's about putting those tools in. So these are both user-generated content platforms. We happen to have 3 million plus registered players. We have a top 50 Nielsen property when you combine our two audiences from a viewership point of view. So it's just a massive content library that we can put together. We monetize 3 simple ways. The first one is that we have a leading in-game and in-stream ad model. And this is not about crummy programmatic advertising and display ads that ruin the gamer experience. This is about in-game and in-stream inventory that is a very premium CPM and allows brands to reach this cord-cutting, ad-blocking, Gen Z audience exactly where they are. They're gaming, right? And the second model is we both have direct-to-consumer businesses. It both happens to be overlap beautifully with our young teen audience. So that's a 13 to 18-year-old demographic that inside our gameplay and streaming businesses can actually buy microtransactions or goods. And then the third that we think is the really untapped, exciting piece is when you look at the amount of content the two companies amass, we already have a deal with Snapchat where we're giving them some of that derivative content, those highlight reels for monetization. So we already have proof points at Super League that people value this content. There's a massive void and thirst for more gaming-centric content. So we know there's interest in it. When you combine those two libraries, it's valuable. But we also believe that just as many companies adjacent to esports are interested in our production and broadcast streaming technology as well. So we think content and content technology monetization is a third leg of the stool.
And that is a great segue, this ecosystem that you're introducing, Ann, into our next guest. That's Ann Hand, Chairman and CEO at Super League Gaming. We're going to have her back on after we talk to Jeff and have the roundtable having her back on with us. So, Ann, stay with us. Jeff Cohen is VP of Strategy and Head of Investor Relations at Esports Entertainment Group, an online gambling company offering wagering on esports events and iGaming. And late last year, Esports Entertainment became the first esports-focused gaming business to actually acquire a U.S. gambling license. Jeff, it's great to have you. So start off by just telling us a little bit more about the entertainment offerings your company provides and the properties that you offer and operate.
Thanks a lot for having me, Hope. So we're Esports Entertainment Group, ticker GMBL, publicly traded on the NASDAQ. Like you mentioned, we're an esports entertainment and online gambling company. On the esports side, we kind of operate in a number of different areas across the ecosystem, but broadly, we have 3 kind of primary consumer-facing platforms. First one being Vi.bet, which is our esports betting platform. You kind of think of that as DraftKings, but for esports, tailored to esports. Second is LandDuel, which we haven't actually launched yet. It'll launch this summer, but it's a player versus player skill-based betting platform. So kind of like the company's skills, but we're going to be doing it rather than for mobile games, but for PC and console games. And then the third consumer-facing platform is Esports Gaming League, EGL. And that's a tournament platform that we're using to partner with some of these professional sports teams that you probably see over my right shoulder if the green screen is working.
I wonder, as you were listening, to Anna and how she was describing, the vast really circle outside of just esports and gaming, what your kind of take on it as well from that betting perspective. How do you see your slice of the pie adjacent to all of the experiences that Ann mentioned in terms of viewership and gaming itself?
Yeah, well, I always love listening to Ann talk about the space. I used to be an analyst and I covered Super League, and I think Ann just does an amazing job kind of evangelizing gaming. So I'll piggyback off everything she said. I mean, there's so much excitement, so many eyeballs here. I think esports gambling is going to be a big part of the monetization. Historically, one of the challenges in esports is you do have all these eyeballs and all this engagement, but monetization has kind of always lagged behind traditional sports. At EEG, we think a big area of that kind of catch-up opportunity is going to be gambling, because esports fans, they're not different from traditional sports fans. They engage with their teams the same way, they're passionate the same way, and we think when given the opportunity, they're going to want to support their teams through gambling the same way.
So when Anne mentioned that, you have 3 billion people who are competitively gaming around the world, and you've got people who are spending actually more time watching others play, compare that to where the betting market is, where you see the growth coming from that perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like I mentioned, there's a lot of growth to come. I mean, I think, where we're focused is really taking esports fans that maybe have not historically been gamblers and turning them into gamblers. And, when I say that, that sounds a bit nefarious, but really we're talking about engaging in a fun and exciting way as you're watching. One of the big differences between esports gamblers and traditional sports gamblers, historically, traditional sports gamblers, they'll go on the platform, they'll go on to DraftKings, they'll place a bet, and then, they'll check back later and see if they won the bet. With esports bettors, they stick around on the platform, they watch the game, they bet, smaller amounts, but in-game, kind of like almost like microtransactions as they're actually watching the event occur. So it's a lot more engaging, a lot more in play, and actually probably represents, what the future of traditional sports betting will be as well.
What about the competitive moat you guys think you have if you look at where DraftKings and Barstool might come in? So what prevents somebody like that from coming into esports betting?
Yeah, I mean, we get this question a lot, and I think the answer is, we're counting on those folks coming in eventually. I think right now they have sort of their work cut out for them. Attracting kind of the mass casual market, people who are traditional sports bettors. We're building more of a niche platform that's tailored to esports bettors. So like I mentioned before, the user experience is different. On DraftKings, you're typically on an app. You're not watching the game there. You're not betting in play there. Our platform is more of a PC client where you're coming, you're watching, you're betting in play, and we're really targeting gamers. If nothing else, they crave authenticity, so they don't want to have to go to DraftKings or FanDuel and click 22 different links to find where the esports matches are. They want a platform that's really their own, and that's tailored for them. So I think that's what we're providing. If you're a traditional sports fan that wants to bet on esports once a quarter, you're not going to be our customer probably. We'd love to have you, but just the reality. We're looking for people who are hardcore fans of esports.
Hardcore fans, let's talk about what's happening with your sports book launch. And we just kind of want to know where the markets are of highest priority after New Jersey.
Yeah, so we haven't announced where we're going to go in the U.S. after New Jersey. A big part of our U.S. strategy, though, will be on the LandDuel side, which is that player versus player skill betting platform. That you can go into 41 states without a license. So we're going to look to kind of launch that over the summer and then expand from there. We also have eSports Gaming League, which is the tournament platform where we're starting to form these partnerships with big professional sports teams. You can see that over my shoulder, whichever one it is. And with that, they're using our platform to engage with their fans. So we're hosting fan tournaments for their fans where they'll be able to win exciting prizes of the teams that we're participating with.
Could you talk a little bit more specifically about the different audiences and the opportunities with just sports fans, and then you have casinos, iGaming, and then you have gamers? I mean, if you were to sort of, and I know you kind of talked about the sort of loyal nature of some of these gamers as well, but if you were to kind of look at these different audiences, how would you describe them?
I wouldn't necessarily say we bucket them. If it's a Venn diagram, the middle piece is probably the largest piece. I mean, one of the things we found during the pandemic is that traditional sports bettors want to bet on esports. Traditional sports fans are esports fans. Esports fans are traditional sports fans as well. Like when we saw teams walking into the NBA bubble, all these guys were carrying gaming consoles. So gaming culture is so pervasive that I don't necessarily think we need to, bucket kind of the three per se.
Lastly, before we go to Nicholas here, what has been some of the key partnerships for you with traditional sports organizations or ones that you're targeting?
Yeah, so I think, like I mentioned before, these partnerships we're doing with these professional sports teams, they kind of came about, during COVID, because these teams were realizing, hey, without being able to have fans in the stands, how are we going to engage with our fans? And their fans are all big gamers, so they thought gaming is obviously a great way to do it. Also, it brings in kind of a new, younger demographic that they're looking to, again, engage with. So we're partnering with them, hosting tournaments where, I think we start next month, actually, the first one with the LA Kings. So we're super excited about that. And as we're doing that, it helps us build just a database of esports fans here throughout the US, which, gives us information about what markets we want to go into next with the Vi platform, builds the database for FanDuel, and kind of just, spins the flywheel on what we can do.
All right, Jeff, thanks so much. Hang tight. We're going to have you back for the roundtable and Q&A with the audience. Jeff Cohen is VP of Strategy and Head of Investor Relations at eSports Entertainment Group. And last but not least, we have Nick Gruce. He is an analyst at ARK Invest. Nick, thanks again for being here. So you're going to help us really zoom out even more here into the broader industry. So I want to focus on this idea of virtual worlds and how gaming fits in. According to your research at ARK Research, you got revenue from virtual worlds that will actually compound 17% annually from roughly 180 billion today to almost 400 billion by 2025. So what is this idea of the virtual worlds and how do you monetize that to this big number here of almost 400 billion by 2025?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Hope, and I'm happy to be on. So when we look at virtual worlds, what we're actually talking about, and the biggest bucket here is traditional gaming. Of that $180 billion today, $175 billion is coming from the traditional gaming industry. The other two categories we have broken out are AR and VR, but really to think of those more as gateways, right? The virtual worlds themselves are these game worlds, these virtual worlds that we play in today. And so when we've looked at this space, what's been really interesting, and I think Anne talked to this point before, right, is the social nature of gaming and how people are spending more time just hanging out with friends, chatting, than they are actually in game playing. And that's on the outside of gaming, on services like Twitch and Super League, but also within the games themselves. These game makers are now making these games social in nature, having free islands like Fortnite, right? They have Party Island to capture this idea that games can be more than just intensive gameplay. You can spend time in these virtual worlds. And so that's how we've really looked at this space. And that's how we get from 180, for gaming itself, $175 billion today to almost $390 billion by 2025, because users are spending more time and they're spending more money in games.
Well, one thing that is contributing to this then, or at least a result of this trend, is that the economic power is shifting away from the developers of these games and over really to the gamers themselves. It's this creator economy we're talking about. It's what Anne was talking about with people just watching other people play, and it's betting on it. It's all of these other smaller circles in this Venn diagram. So as you're measuring it, is that also kind of part of this nearly $400 billion figure we're looking at?
Absolutely. And I think there's a lot of converging trends we can get into here. But so when we looked at this space, the way that we really tried to break it out was on a cost per hour basis. And we tried to do this for almost every entertainment platform we look at. And so when we looked at gaming, we broke it out in the US to around 25 cents an hour per gamer. And we think that that's going to increase by roughly 20% to almost 30 cents per hour. So you have that increasing, and at the same time, users spending more time in game, from around an hour a day to an hour and a half a day. That was kind of how we broke out this market. And so yes, you're correct. And not only that, but you also have this idea that the creation of gaming is coming way down the cost curve. If you look at game engines like Unity or Roblox, right? They're giving the power back to these developers. They're making it very, very, very easy to create games. This is a moment, if you were to go back 10 years ago, what Instagram did for photos, and before that, what Adobe did to editing. All of that is now happening within interactive virtual worlds. I mean, it is absolutely mind-blowing when you really start to think about it at that level.
Now let's talk about AR and VR. You mentioned it a little bit here, and I think the basic concept of it that we maybe have interacted with is through our phones, maybe through Snap or through Apple devices. Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg has been pushing this quite a bit. I mean, at this point, how long will it take for us to get to that, sort of player one, kind of reality or future versus, using these devices that we have in our hands today as the primary vehicle for VR and AR gaming?
Absolutely. So typically at ARC, we have a 5-year investment time horizon. With AR and VR, we decided to really extend that to a 10-year forecast and look at it on a 10-year basis, because this is a shift in computing, right? These are going or could potentially become our primary mobile and at-home computing devices. If you think of AR at the mobile level and VR at home. And so when we think about this is a massive and momentous shift, right? Imagine no longer walking around with a phone and interacting with AR through your phone. You're now using a pair of headsets, and Facebook just came out with a blog where we're going to be having a wristband or a smartwatch to be able to interact with these virtual worlds. And it's really important to understand that this is going to take time. But as we see it, we see consumer grade headsets for AR coming on the market around 2022. And VR, I think, we're starting to see very, very strong use cases for VR. I have the Oculus Quest 2 upstairs. I'm addicted. And I think most people can say that the leaps and bounds that Facebook has made within VR and what they've done with Oculus is truly incredible.
And before we turn it to the group for some questions that I would love all of you to weigh in on, NFTs are here. When SNL, does NFTs, it's hitting that mainstream. There's a lot of hype in that art world. You see a big opportunity for gaming, this intersection of gaming and NFTs as well. So explain where that intersection comes from.
Sure. So I think, and again, this is very early days now, but when we look at this space and we talk about virtual worlds, if you want to look at it, the Ready Player One thesis, you're going to have interoperability between game worlds, and NFTs present maybe the best use case for gaming, in that you'll have these unique digital assets, and we're not talking just digital art that has functionality in viewing, but actual functionality within gameplay. Imagine having a scarce sword or gun within Call of Duty that you can then transfer to other games, and that has unique value within the digital space. And we're starting to see companies and coins come out in this space. Two that have jumped on my radar recently, the Sandbox and then Engine. And these are two different kind of projects within the space, but they both get at the same point. And it's allowing non-fungible tokens to enter into these virtual worlds and these game worlds. And it has truly, it can really change a lot of things in the game space.
Right, I can see that happening in those worlds and picking that up, and for the creators too of NFTs to then come into this industry. You can tell that there's a lot of people who are interested in this topic, lots of questions. We're going to start compiling them now as we get on with the roundtable section of our discussion. And for all three of the panelists today, Nicholas, and Jeff, the question of streaming is an important one, I think, in terms of it being a big driver of wider popularity and then all of these additional streams of revenue. So, Google and Amazon have been sort of quietly dominating this aspect. You've got Twitch owned by Amazon, you've got YouTube owned by Google. And maybe starting with you, are there other platforms for viewership, for attention that we're not paying attention to?
Well, certainly we work with, all the big ones that you'd expect, right? YouTube and Twitch. We just ran a broadcast of last Thursday night, an Apex Legends tournament, and on TikTok got 21 million views that evening. So certainly, when you think about that democratization of who the content creator is, they are all using all of those social platforms. And the beauty of the Mob Crush technology is that streamer gets the tools for free, and they can first multicast, which means that instead of doing an independent broadcast for each, they can hit one button and hit all of their social audiences simultaneously. But even more importantly, back to what Nicholas was talking about, it also allows that creator to turn their livelihood or their kind of passion into a livelihood. So they get to participate then in any of the ad revenues that we are placing in stream and in game for their views. So much like the Roblox is a shared economy that empowers the creators, we have those same principles in Mob Crush and also in our Minecraft owned and operated property called Minehut, where in our content creator marketplace, people who participate can get a cut of revenue for the great content they create.
Nicholas, are there other platforms? I mean, Anne just mentioned TikTok. I think monetizing on TikTok has been a fascinating area for a lot of people. I mean, I know for the music industry, for example, right, trying to capitalize on some of these songs that go viral. How are you looking at the streaming space specifically in terms of driving growth in this industry and then new forms of streaming that might be helping to grow as well?
I think just keeping on TikTok, we've done work here. We have a blog out on TikTok, and what we saw on TikTok is this natural distribution, or very just friendly distribution for creators. Trying to post something on Instagram that's a mature marketplace versus TikTok that has an algorithm that boosts based on performance, not based on prior followers or the amount of followers you have. I think that's a great place to be looking if you're one of these new creators wanting to make a splash. And then beyond that, I think when you really take a step back and think about just live streaming in general, this is a feature that's been rolled out on almost every platform. Everyone has a piece of this live streaming space. And it's really interesting to see it's also now playing out with audio, right? Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces. But these are really features that I think most platforms will have and continue to have, because it helps drive just passive engagement with whatever is being shown. And that's really important to keep users engaged, not just actively engaged like when you're playing a game, but passively engaged when you're just hanging out around the periphery of the ecosystem.
I'm glad you brought up Clubhouse. I think a lot of people who do game in that very social way have looked at this and said, yeah, I mean, this is what gamers have been doing, forever, is they're playing and they're talking constantly and you're on it for hours, and that's how you connect and socialize and make new friends. So I'm glad you brought that up. Last question for the team here before we head over to audience Q&A. Just looking at the landscape, are there lots of areas where you think, I'll start with you, Jeff, where there could be some more consolidation happening, and then we'll move to Nicholas and then Anne.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, anytime you have a nascent industry, you have a lot of growth, you're going to have some consolidation. We've definitely seen it a bit on the publisher side. Some decent sized acquisitions of gaming companies. That kind of comes with when you're talking about businesses where scale is important. I think on the the esports side, I'll talk about the betting space. I mean, I think you'll probably see some consolidation over time, either between esports betting companies or maybe the bigger traditional betting companies like DraftKings and FanDuel looking to acquire esports vertical kind of focused companies to get that additional demographic. But yeah, I definitely think you will see additional consolidation just in general in the space.
Anne or Nicholas, anything else you want to add there? No?
And I'll let you.
Yeah, no, I definitely think it's a highly fragmented, lots of mom and pops out there. It's not easy to raise money privately. And so, rare kind of companies that are listed on NASDAQ like Super League and eSports Entertainment give an opportunity for the public markets to participate in eSports, because we're both pure plays, right? You don't have to bet on what the next great game title is going to be. And having that access to public capital absolutely was part of our strategy, and I'm sure theirs, in how we could get ahead of the M&A opportunities.
All right, and we do have some audience questions, so we'll try to get to as many of these as we can. But this first one comes from Jenna, who asks the group here if there are still a sort of an underrepresentation problem when it comes to people who identify as women in esports at a professional level, or even in the levels of investing, of interest in investing. And if there is still sort of this underrepresentation of people who identify as female, what is being done and I guess we'll start with Anne and Jeff, to be really more inclusive?
Yeah, I mean, that's always been a big part of the premise of Super League. In the early days when we were determining what the brand stood for, we saw that there was something beautiful about gaming, that it broke down a lot of the walls that occur physically. It can be gender neutral. A physically challenged person with the right peripherals can level the playing field. And there was something kind of very aligning and inclusive about that. We just on February 13th ran a Galentine's Day broadcast where we not only had all female League of Legends players, but it was also the shoutcasters, the people behind the camera. So it was a 100% female broadcast. And that was another one where, again, we landed on the TikTok discovery page and got about 14 million views that night. So you can see that there's a lot of thirst for the content. What we found early on, and I've seen some of the comments in chat about a lot of the toxicity in gaming, that's a small percent who enjoy that, the unfortunate things that come with anonymity online socially. But we had a really high, standard on sportsmanship and had a pretty strict code of conduct. And what we found is that once we enforced that code of conduct, the community started to self-police. They became the moderators. And that was powerful because, again, it goes right back to the ethos of putting the rules, the tools, the experience into the hand of the players and the streamers themselves. And so I think that we're, standing on the right side of what gamers and their experiences really should be and want to be, which is that they're inclusive, they're good, fair gameplay, and then most importantly, they're highly entertaining.
And we have a question that is related to this from Juan around handling that toxicity. And you mentioned a little bit is really leaving it up to the community. Does the community always do a good job, good enough job that you don't have to step in?
We don't just leave it to the community, but we did define the code of conduct, and then we set the example. And once you set the example, then the community knows that this is what Super League experiences stand for, and then that's when they fight to preserve it. And so it takes both. I think it takes a commitment from, just like with the publisher, right, who designs the game, a commitment from their side, and then a commitment from the community. That's when I think the magic happens and you create a much more positive, safe space.
And our next question, I think this one is for you, Jeff. How will we, this question from Matt, how will we be able to watch competitions, the recordings of the competitions that people bet on?
Yeah, so we have on our platform, the tournament platform, EGL, EGL.tv. I think they have a Twitch stream, and then they have on that website where you can watch. So it's all streamed. Our mantra is play, watch, bet. We allow people to play, watch, and bet on esports kind of wherever they are. So watch is clearly a piece of that.
And then Nicholas, this question is for you from Isaac. How can blockchain technology and NFTs be used in games like Call of Duty and Fortnite, looking at just sort of, again, decentralized platforms being at the forefront of this digital ownership revolution, that the economy shifting from developers to gamers?
It comes back to this idea around virtual worlds, but then virtual goods and these virtual economies, right? If you want these economies and these virtual worlds to thrive, you have to introduce real elements from, our economy, our physical economy, into these virtual worlds, and that revolves around scarcity. And that's how NFTs can be used. And if you look back over the past 10 years, virtual goods as a percentage of revenue, so you're talking about in-game monetization, has gone from roughly 20% to now 75% of all gaming revenue. So that's on that $175 billion number we talked about before. And so virtual goods are a very, very important part of the gaming ecosystem. So when you add that extra layer of scarcity and rarity to it, I think it really starts to shape up what virtual economies could start to look like. And that's just mimicking our own physical economy.
And is there a way that VR ties into how NFTs can also be more prevalent in games?
Absolutely. I think it comes back to kind of the idea that games have throughout history gotten more interactive, and the end state really is to put on a headset and to not even realize you're playing a game. It should mimic our physical reality around us, and that's what VR is ultimately trying to get at, right? It's trying to get you to put on this, headset and forget where you are, forget that you're wearing this headset, and realize, oh my God, we've kind of crossed over this uncanny valley. And I don't know if I'm in the physical or virtual world at this point, because it's gotten that good. And that's really the progression that we're going towards. So ultimately, as interactivity in gaming gets better and better, the virtual world and the virtual economies will grow in value.
All right, and last question before we wrap our afternoon from me here. So when we look at the first point that Anne made to really set the stage, right, that you still have 3 billion people who are competitive gamers who are categorized this way. What's still kind of the biggest misperception about gaming, about esports? You know, if we're still looking at the release of, you know, the next Avatar as being a big milestone for culture around the world, or at least here in the US, what's it going to take for gaming? And maybe I'm in my own bubble, right? That there are levels and you know, communities as large as those kinds of fans, but to really kind of hit that mainstream where we don't kind of need to ask this question anymore.
Well, I'll jump in. I mean, this is something that I felt like I had to go through my own wake up call on, right? When I was thinking about joining the company. And it's when I realized that gaming isn't something you grow out of anymore. You've got older millennials who are still gamers having their first children. 46% of kids who game say they game with a parent as a way to spend time with each other. And the most important one is that gaming can be absolutely great for you. In fact, you know, it's a heck of a lot better than me spending 5 hours on a Saturday night binging Netflix passively, right? When it's done in the right context, you can make friends. There's deep layers of strategy, critical thinking. It has high indications that you'll be good at other complex things like computer science. And so I just think that one of the mantras that we feel we need to reinforce is that gaming is good.
Jeff, Nicholas, you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I'll weigh in on something. I guess the question was around a misconception or maybe something about the industry. One thing we've gotten asked a lot recently, and I'm sure Anne has too, is, you know, well, what happens after COVID? Like, is everyone just going to leave their house and gaming is going to recede or gaming's dead? And I would just push back on that strenuously. You know, hopefully we get to leave our houses a bit more, and, you know, obviously that's great for everyone, but gaming is a way of life for our core customers. It's a passion of theirs. It's really how they define their identity. So, you know, the idea that all of a sudden 6 months from now, we're going to be able to go to the movies, but we're going to stop playing video games, I would just say that's not going to happen. You know, gaming is here to stay. COVID accelerated this mainstreamization, and it was obviously good for all of us on this panel.
And just to piggyback off of Jeff here, I do think COVID is very instrumental here in starting a new trend for gaming. And I think it goes back to the misconceptions of spending hours in front of a screen, right? Well, we do that now, and it just so happens that games are also played on screens. And now we work in front of screens all day in our homes, and now we game all day in front of our screens in our homes. So I think that trend has set a new precedent in gaming, in that, you know, people are not looking at it as this bad thing. You know, you shouldn't be spending hours a day playing Call of Duty. No, I think it's just as acceptable as doing anything else, binging Netflix, as Anne said, right? It's just as acceptable today. And I think COVID did, you know, kind of push that narrative forward.
And to be baking on weekdays and to put on, what is it, the average like 25 pounds now. So I like it. All great things. Thank you all so much for being here today, guys. This concludes our Level Up Gaming and Esports Trends in 2021 investment theme based chat. Thank you, Anne Hand, Chairman and CEO of Super League Gaming, Jeff Cohen, VP of Strategy and Investor Relations at Esports Entertainment Group, and Nicholas Grouse, who is the analyst at ARK Invest covering all things gaming. And thank you all for joining this conversation. This Public Talks event is in partnership with Voices of Wall Street. We look forward to seeing you again next time. Take care. Thank you.